Grace Chen stood in the pediatric ward's break room, staring at the invitation that had arrived in her locker that morning. The hospital's annual charity gala, an event she'd heard about for 3 years but never attended. This year, the invitation came with a personal note from Dr. Martinez. "Grace, your dedication to our young patients deserves recognition. Please join us as our guest." At 28, Grace had been working as a pediatric nurse for 5 years, pouring her heart into caring for sick children while stretching every dollar of her modest salary. The invitation was an honor, but as she looked at the elegant script requesting formal attire, her heart sank. After paying rent, student loans, and helping her elderly mother with medical expenses, there was nothing left for an evening gown. She was about to tuck the invitation away when a small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Nurse Grace, Daddy says I can have ice cream if I take all my medicine today." Grace turned to see 7-year-old Lily Hoffman bouncing into the break room, her bald head covered by a bright pink hat decorated with butterflies. Behind her walked her father, Alexander Hoffman, looking tired but managing a smile for his daughter's benefit. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Grace said, kneeling to Lily's level. "But remember, only one scoop. We don't want to upset your tummy before treatment." Alexander watched this interaction with the same quiet admiration he'd felt for weeks. Grace had been Lily's primary nurse since they'd started the intensive chemotherapy protocol, and she had a gift for making his daughter feel safe and cared for during the most frightening time of their lives. "Mr. Hoffman," Grace said, standing to address him, "Dr. Martinez wanted me to review Lily's medication schedule with you for the weekend." As they discussed the complex routine of pills and timing, Alexander found himself studying Grace's face. She was beautiful, certainly, but what struck him most was her complete focus on Lily's well-being. In his world, corporate boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations, people always had ulterior motives. Grace's only agenda seemed to be helping his daughter get better. After they finished discussing Lily's care, Alexander lingered as Grace walked them back to the room. "Grace," he said quietly while Lily was distracted by a coloring book, "I wanted to thank you again. I know caring for Lily is your job, but the way you make her feel special, it means everything." Grace smiled, that warm expression that had gotten Lily through so many difficult procedures. "She is special, Mr. Hoffman. All of our kids are." "Lily's just got extra sparkle," something in her voice made. Alexander realized this wasn't professional courtesy. Grace genuinely cared about every child who came through these doors. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said impulsively. "Are you going to the hospital gala next week?" Grace's smile faltered slightly. I received an invitation. Dr. Martinez was very kind to include me. But Alexander sensed there was more to the story. Grace glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I'm honored to be invited, but I'm not sure it's really for someone like me. The people who attend those events, we move in very different circles." Alexander studied her face, recognizing the careful way she'd phrased her concerns. As the CEO of Hoffman Industries, he'd attended countless charity events, surrounded by people more interested in being seen than in the cause they were supposedly supporting. "Grace," he said gently, "would you consider going with me?" "As my date?" The words surprised him as much as they did her. Alexander hadn't dated anyone since his wife had passed 4 years ago, too focused on work and Lily to even consider it. Grace stared at him in shock. "Mr. Hoffman, that's very kind, but I couldn't possibly—" "Please, call me Alexander." "And why couldn't you?" Grace felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Alexander, you don't understand. I couldn't afford the kind of dress appropriate for an event like that." Alexander's expression softened with understanding. He'd grown up poor himself, before building his company from nothing. He remembered that particular shame of not being able to afford to fit in. "Grace, what if that wasn't an issue? What if I told you that having someone there who actually cares about the hospital's mission, someone who embodies what we're supposed to be celebrating, matters more than what anyone wears?" Before Grace could respond, Lily called out from her bed, "Daddy, are you asking Nurse Grace on a date? Because she's really pretty and she makes the best paper airplanes in the whole hospital." Both adults turned red, but Alexander laughed. "What do you think, Lily? Should I ask Nurse Grace to the fancy party? Yes, Lily said with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. But Daddy, you have to make sure she gets a really pretty dress. Like a princess dress. Alexander looked at Grace with something between hope and nervousness. So, will you let me take you shopping for a princess dress and then escort you to what will probably be a boring dinner where we can complain about the rubber chicken together? Grace found herself caught between practicality and the flutter of possibility she felt whenever Alexander looked at her like that, like she was someone worth knowing beyond her professional capacity. Alexander, I can't let you buy me a dress. That wouldn't be appropriate. What if it wasn't a gift? He suggested. What if it was? An investment in making sure the gala has at least one person there who genuinely cares about the cause. That's a very expensive rationalization, Grace said, but she was smiling now. I can afford it, Alexander replied simply. The question is, can you afford to let someone do something nice for you? 2 days later, Grace found herself in an upscale boutique, feeling completely out of place as a saleswoman showed her gowns that cost more than her monthly rent. I think we need something that shows off your natural elegance, the saleswoman said, pulling a midnight blue dress from the rack. This would be perfect with your coloring. Grace tried on the dress and barely recognized herself in the mirror. The deep blue fabric brought out her eyes, and the simple but elegant cut made her feel graceful rather than out of place. It's beautiful, she whispered, then checked the price tag and winced. But Alexander, this is too much. Alexander, who had been waiting patiently while she tried on options, looked up from his phone. When he saw her in the blue dress, his expression changed completely. Grace, he said softly, you look stunning. The dress is gorgeous. But the dress is nice, Alexander interrupted gently. But you're stunning. There's a difference. The night of the gala? Alexander picked up Grace at her small apartment, carrying a corsage and looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. You clean up pretty well for a CEO, Grace said, admiring his classic black tuxedo. You clean up pretty well for someone who claims she doesn't belong at fancy parties, he replied, offering her his arm. At the gala, Grace watched Alexander navigate the crowd with easy confidence, introducing her to colleagues and donors with genuine pride. But what surprised her most was how different he seemed here, still professional but warmer, more relaxed than the worried father she'd known in the hospital. You're not what I expected, she told him during a quiet moment on the terrace. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more corporate? More focused on business than people? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Lily changed me. Before she got sick, I probably was exactly what you expected. Work was everything. But when your child is fighting for her life, you realize pretty quickly what actually matters. And what matters? Grace asked softly. The people who show up, Alexander said, looking directly at her. The people who care without being asked to care. The people who make a 7-year-old girl feel brave when she's terrified. As they danced later that evening, Grace marveled at how natural it felt to be in Alexander's arms, how easy their conversation had become. Can I tell you something? Alexander said as the music slowed. This is my first date since my wife died. Grace looked up at him with surprise and something deeper, understanding. Are you okay with that? I'm more than okay with it. I'm grateful it's with you. 6 months later, Lily was in remission and back to her energetic, butterfly-loving self. Grace had become a fixture in their lives, joining them for weekend adventures and quiet dinners, becoming the steady, loving presence both Hoffmans had needed. On the anniversary of that first gala, Alexander found Grace in Lily's hospital room during one of their follow-up visits, reading a story to a group of young patients. You know, he said as they walked to the parking garage later, I never properly thanked you for saying yes to that first date. You bought me a beautiful dress and took me to a fancy party, Grace replied. I think thanks were definitely on my side. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. Grace, the dress was just fabric. What made that evening special was you, your kindness, your genuine heart, the way you made me remember what it felt like to hope for something beyond just getting through each day. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Grace's breath caught. I'm not asking because you saved my daughter, though you did. I'm not asking because you brought light back into our lives, though you did that too. I'm asking because somewhere between that first conversation in the break room and now, I fell completely in love with a woman who cares more about making a sick child smile than owning a fancy dress. As Grace looked down at the ring, simple, elegant, perfect, she thought about that invitation she'd almost thrown away, the dress she'd thought she couldn't afford, and the date she'd almost refused out of practicality. Sometimes, the most beautiful gowns aren't the ones that cost. The most money, they're the ones worn by people whose inner beauty transforms everything around them. And sometimes the most elegant evenings aren't about the venue or the food, they're about finding someone who sees your true worth and chooses to celebrate it. The dress had been lovely, but what had truly been priceless was discovering that love could grow in the most unexpected places, between two people who had learned that the best things in life aren't bought, they're given freely, received gratefully and cherished always.